Welcome to the Workology Podcast, a podcast for the disruptive workplace leader. Join host Jessica Miller-Merrill, founder of Workology.com, as she sits down and gets to the bottom of trends, tools, and case studies for the business leader, HR, and recruiting professional who is tired of the status quo. Now here's Jessica with this episode of Workology.
According to Fortune magazine, employee retention is the biggest priority for business leaders this year. A research study by Workplace and Kronos found that 87% of employers said that improving retention is a critical priority for their organization. The topic of conversation that is likely in the boardroom, you've heard this before, and with the leadership team is probably about retention. But the question is, what is the best way to increase retention and reduce turnover? That's exactly what my guest today, Jeff Cordes, an employee retention expert, will talk with us today. Jeff, welcome to the Workology Podcast.
It's good to be here, Jessica.
Can you talk to us a little bit about your background and what exactly is an employee retention expert?
Okay, well, my background is 25 years in human resources in plant and corporate environments, a lot of different types of industries, a lot of manufacturing, software, food processing, so very diverse type of industries that I've worked in, and I did that for 25 years, and that's where I really built my foundation on employee retention. And then when I started my own firm 10 years ago, I actually started out as a professional recruiter, or as some people like to call us, headhunters. And I found that because I go into organizations and recruit talent from my clients, I really have a pretty sound knowledge of what it takes to keep folks within an environment, and that's how I got into the employee retention aspect of what I do as part of my business.
I love that because you're able to talk to prospective candidates who are leaving their organization, so you're hearing why they are in the market and looking for a new opportunity, and be able to pass along that information to clients focused on employee retention.
Absolutely, and what happens is it's constantly evolving because the workforce is evolving. So what I find is the things that I hear never cease to amaze me, and I hear new things day in and day out, and I use those things when I speak on employee retention to be able to relate to the audience that these are real life issues that organizations face.
I said in the intro that companies want to increase retention and reduce turnover. That sounds very simple. And when you're talking to your CEO, it's like, hey, we need to do these things, but it's not. Why is that?
Well, I always tell organizations that I work with, employee retention is simple. It's not easy. What I focus on is I'm a big believer in fundamentals. I actually had a boss very early on in my career that he said to me, I came to him and I was telling him all these great reasons how we keep people. At the time I was 25, and of course when you're 25, I think you have all the answers. I know I did. And he said, Jeff, let's forget fancy fads. Let's focus on the fundamentals. So I believe that that's really the way you drive employee retention. And oftentimes I see organizations simply have a lack of focus. They will try one thing one day, one thing another day, one thing another day, and they'll jump from thing to thing. And as a result, they have no cohesive strategy that's designed to attack the problem of employee retention.
Let's talk about your philosophy. What does CRAP, or CRAP, which
Sure.
makes me laugh, but I think it probably gets people thinking and breaks down some barriers. But what does CRAP have to do with employee retention?
Well, again, and I learned the same gentleman who told me about fancy fads. I really learned that caring, respect, appreciation, and praise are at the heart of driving employee retention. I talk about give your employees crap and 7 other secrets to employee retention. There's 7 other fundamentals, but I believe that crap and giving your people crap is really what is at the heart of it, because people want to know that you care about them and that you respect them. And then when they do something right, you got to show them appreciation. You got to praise them for what they do. So it's a situation where that's really kind of at the core of my philosophy. And one day I was driving down I-94 heading to a client, and I started thinking about the discussion I had with audiences, and it dawned on me, CRAP, crap. And so now everything I talk about is crap. And it's actually, and I like it because, to your point, it really gives organizations and people permission to have some fun. Because employee retention is can be kind of a heavy topic, but people hear it, they lighten up, and it just makes the process of educating them much easier.
But I think lightening up is really what caring, respect, appreciation, and praise is all about.
I agree. I mean, and I think in many cases we take ourselves too seriously. I know particularly I saw that when I was in corporate America. We tend to take ourselves too seriously, and people look at that and say, "Boy, why don't you lighten up? You can still have, I guess, you can have fun at work and still get the job done." That's always been my philosophy.
Well, I love it. CRAP, C-R-A-P. And I tell you, when I got the press request email, that's what got me. I think I sent it over to my blog editor, and it said, look at this. This is fun and funny and shines light on a subject that I think that is a little heavy, like you said. So job well done. It got my attention. I'm sure it gets the folks that you're training and the conversations you're having with the clients, it's resonating with them.
Well, I tell people I've rebranded everything crap. Everything I do is crap now. So.
I love it. I give a crap. You do, right?
Right, exactly.
Well, let's take a little bit of a reset here. This is Jessica Miller Merrill, and you're listening to the Workology podcast. Today, we're talking about employee retention strategies with Jeff Cordes. You can follow Jeff on Twitter at Jeff Cordes, JEFFKORTES. The topic today is your CEO's biggest priority is employee retention, and we're talking about strategies for success to help improve retention at your organization. So let's get back to it. Jeff, you recently published an article about exit interviews, and we'll include that link in the podcast transcript here, but your exit interview philosophy and strategy is different than most that I've heard in terms of the time that you conduct the interviews. Can you walk us through the philosophy and maybe why you don't do interviews immediately or at the week of the employee leaving the organization?
Yeah, what I find is that people have been coached that you don't say anything bad about the organization because you don't want to burn bridges, which is a smart thing for an employee to do. So I'll usually do the exit interviews anywhere from 30 to 90 days after a person has left, even sometimes as far out as 6 months. Pick up the phone, give them a call and say, hey, you've left the organization. Would you be willing to talk to me about what it is that bothers you about the organization, why you decided you wanted to leave? Because for some reason, I've noticed that there's a shift in attitude. People are much more forthcoming and willing to be open with you as a result. I think the other thing, and I'm a believer that even though you do exit interviews, there should never be any reason that someone leaves an organization that you're taken by surprise. What you should learn 30, 60, 90 days later should not be a surprise, because you should know that if you're close to your people and understanding and talking with them day in and day out, you should pretty much see it coming. If you don't see it coming, that means you missed something.
You say up to 6 months. I wonder if that is just because you're psychologically still processing and you're in the culture, and also you haven't moved forward yet and moved on. And so by waiting that 30, 60 days or even 6 months, that person is in a new place and can look back and have better reflection, and therefore providing the employer, their previous employer anyways, with more honest and possibly helpful information.
I think that's a big part of it. I just think that the other thing is that last 2 weeks before somebody leaves, there's usually a flurry of activity because they're trying to figure out how they're going to backfill the position, what that person's going to do, and they're bringing other people up to speed. So it's often rushed as well. And then you have this formal process where you bring them into the office and say, we want to do the exit interview. And I think it intimidates people. I'm a big believer. I don't even like to use a form, because when you put a piece of paper in front of someone and ask them to put down their thoughts, it's almost too official, and it's too inhibiting.
I think it's the kind of headhunter recruiter side of you. Like, you want to have a kind of a casual conversation. I feel like those are sometimes better because it just flows, and then you're able to get more information from that person because they're more comfortable. It's not a document that they're filling out or real formal, and maybe more helpful information is being shared.
I would agree, and I think my style is very casual and I guess disarming, and so people tend to talk to me as a result. Or and the other piece is as now as an independent third party, people are even more willing to talk to me than they were when I was an HR professional.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, executive leaders are focused on employee retention. We talked about that at the beginning of the podcast. How does human resources and operations leaders have conversations with their executive team about their priorities and plans to increase retention and employee engagement?
Well, I think the conversation really has to begin with, talking about, what the first thing is, what's the bottom line impact? A lot of organizations and a lot of people talk about the fact that employee retention is important, but I'm amazed at the number of organizations that never, ever try to quantify it. That's one piece. But the other piece I find that when I'm talking with corporate executives that really tends to strike a chord is, crazy as it sounds, forget about money. Let's talk about the fact if you don't have enough people to staff your organization, to run your factory, to deliver a service, it's a matter of survival. And I find that tends to get more corporate executives' attention than even when you talk about money, because you can absorb the money issue, but if you don't have people to run your operation, it's a matter of survival and viability. And that gets their attention.
In this day and age, when it comes to investments and venture firms and the number of capital that's going into a lot of these startups, money might not be the problem, but it's that people, regardless of how much money you have, if you don't have the people to do the work to run your business, you can't function.
That's exactly it. So it does get people's attention, certainly.
I like that. And I think that that's a good takeaway for this conversation. And as leaders are listening here in terms of how do they talk to their senior leadership team and specifically their CEO, it's maybe not necessarily focusing so much on the number and the money, but what happens if we don't have enough people to maintain normal business operations? That's a scary thought.
Absolutely, and if it's not a matter of survival, it clearly inhibits your ability to grow your organization.
So we talked about conversations with your senior leaders. How is the retention conversation different with your frontline leaders and middle management?
When I work with organizations and I'm talking with frontline leaders and middle level managers, I focus on self-interest. I tell them, look, forget about the money. When you don't have enough people to run your operation, to staff your line, whatever it is, who does that fall on? It falls on the first line leader and the middle level manager, because they're scrambling. They're having to put pressure on the people that they do have to get product out or deliver the service. And so I tell them, even if you don't want to do it for the organization, do it because it's in your self-interest to lower turnover in your organization, because it's going to make life a lot simpler for you, and you're going to be able to breathe a lot easier, and you're going to go home a lot less stressed than you could if you've constantly got this churn in your organization. So I appeal to their self-interest.
I think that's a great thought, and definitely one that we can take away as well. Let's talk about the biggest opportunity that an organization might have when it comes to employee retention. What is that, do you think?
I think the biggest opportunity is and this may sound dismal, but when I look at the way the world is and compared to when it was when I started in the HR profession, is, for no better term, the world's more screwed up, and people have more issues than they've ever had. And what I find is that oftentimes someone gets into the disciplinary system, or they've got an issue going on in their life that impacts their ability to perform on the job. The opportunity for an organization is if they can somehow do an intervention to help that person get on track. I'm a huge advocate of employee assistance programs, because if you can help that person early on to get through a bump in the road, the likelihood that their performance is going to deteriorate and they're going to become a turnover statistic diminishes significantly. And the scary thing is I've had employee assistance professionals tell me that 20% of the people at any given time have issues going on in their life that impact their ability to optimally perform on the job. So if you can help people through those issues early on, the likelihood that it's going to get serious and impact your productivity, your quality, and then ultimately your retention is huge.
This is a great follow-up discussion to last week's podcast, which talks specifically about mental illness at work and how many employees are diagnosed each year. It's approximately just under 27% that have some sort of mental health issue that it was impacting their personal as well as their professional lives.
Yeah, and again, it can be mental health, it can be alcohol, it can be drug, it can be marital problems, it can be issues with your children. There's so many things that frankly now the world is more complex than it was 30 years ago, and as a result, and people are stretched thinner and thinner than they've ever been stretched, and so it has an impact on them. So if you can get in early and help them through those bumps, it's to your advantage.
I think that's wonderful. And it really falls in line with the CRAP philosophy, right? Is you're taking care of your employees, you're showing them that you care and appreciate them personally and professionally.
If you help one person, people talk and the word spreads. The word spreads that the organization was there for me when I needed help. It's huge, and it sends the message that you care. And as the world's, I'll say, gotten more depersonalized, we're a little hesitant to get closer to people because of, I'll say, political correctness and things like that. But I think more so than ever, people want to know that you care. And of course, certainly respect is something that people deserve and is almost expected as a given. It's different from the days when I first started, where you earned respect. Now people feel that they deserve basic respect from the start, and then until they do something to lose that respect, that they should be respected. So what's happened over the course of my career, I think has shifted significantly, but ultimately CRAP applied back then and it still applies now.
Well, Jeff, thank you so much for joining us today. Where can people go to learn more about you and what you do?
They could go to www.jeffcortis.com, and they can check out my videos. They can check out my my blogs, and certainly if they have questions, I always make the offer. Pick up the phone. Give me a call. I love to talk retention. It's a passion of mine, and if I can help people out, I'd love to do so.
That's certainly apparent in this conversation, which I have very much enjoyed, and I hope that our listeners of the Workology podcast have enjoyed as well. The Workology podcast is a podcast for the disruptive workplace leader who's tired of the status quo. This is Jessica Miller Merrill. Until next time, you can visit the newly launched and rebranded Workology.com to listen to all our previous Workology podcast episodes. Have a great day.
Production services for the Workology podcast with Jessica Miller Merrill provided by TotalPicture.com.